Hello again. It's me, your best buddy Dave, here to talk about High Guardian Spice for like the 100th time, I think. Now, people say I'm obsessed with this show and I talk about it way too much, but can you really blame me? It's such an interesting case study. You could analyze this show for hours on end and still find more things wrong the harder you look. This thing's production was a disaster, its announcement was a disaster, its release was a disaster, and the episodes are disasters. It's like this show was created by some of the greatest minds of our generation trying to figure out how to make the most easily hateable thing in existence. And sure, maybe some of the hatred towards this show isn't necessarily justified, but I can't really be surprised that it's like this. Cause come on, it's so easy to make fun of, it fails on almost every level. Keyword being almost. I know when I talk about this show I make it seem like there's no redeeming qualities whatsoever, but believe it or not, there are good things in here. But the issue is all of the positives of this show are drowned out by the negatives. For every single pro, there's 20 cons, and even the good things in this show are ruined by the terribleness around them. It's kind of like throwing sprinkles on a dumpster fire. I mean, sure, the sprinkles are nice and all, but they're also on top of a flaming heap of garbage. It almost makes you wish some of these good things could have been plucked out of this show and placed in a better one. Like Amaryllis and Snapdragon. I like them, but they're also stuck in this terrible show. I'm giving all this preamble to make the point that even though something in this show might be good on its own, it's also handcuffed to the terribleness around it. Now, assuming you actually read the title of this video, we're going to be talking about the best episode in High Guardian Spice. Usually trying to find a best episode in a show is difficult because it can have a lot of really good episodes. But in this case, there's just so many bad ones that trying to find the good one is difficult because they're all terrible when you look at them from an outside perspective. In order to understand why a certain episode is the best, you have to understand how bad the rest of them are in comparison. The bar has been set so ridiculously low that even managing to clear it won't make you look like a good episode in general. This makes my job really difficult, because if I say something is the best episode, the first thing you'll probably think of is, no, this episode is terrible, but you also have to realize every episode is terrible. So it's not about finding the best, it's about finding the least bad. So, what episode is the least bad from my perspective? Well, there are two in particular that stand out to me. I've said it before in other videos, but if you haven't seen them, I would say that the Festival of Fall is probably a high point in the series. I would say that these two episodes are the one time in my watch through of this series that I was actually somewhat intrigued on what was going on the screen. And I mean intrigued as in interested in the story way, not in a how is this so bad way. Now, as I said before, I'm not going to pretend like these episodes are great, because again, it's High Guardian Spice. But I can't really think of a single other episode that's on par with these two. Like, seriously, do you really want to tell me that episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 are anywhere as near interesting as these two? Now, the reason that these two episodes in particular were more interesting to me than the rest of the series is because it actually felt like the plot was being advanced. Throughout all the episodes before this, we got hints that a plot was probably happening, but it never really took shape until this part of the series. Now, if you think taking all the way until episodes 8 and 9 to actually get the plot started sounds insane, you would be absolutely right. It really baffles me that it took them 8 episodes to really introduce a villain. Before this, the best we got was Olive revealing herself at the tail end of episode 7. There was also that time in episode 2 where Time looked at a cat weirdly and that was supposed to be foreshadowing or something. But seriously, looking at a cat weirdly, that's your idea of foreshadowing a villain? With the way that this was set up, it kind of feels like this whole plot with the rotten olive was an afterthought. Like they wanted to make a show that's like a slice of life with a bunch of adventurers at a magic school, but then they decided, you know what, we're gonna shove this overarching plot into the story. I think it comes back to the whole identity crisis thing of this show not knowing what it wants to be. Outside of maybe episode 12, episodes 8 and 9 feel like the only time that this show is actually committed to its own storyline. For the rest of this series, it felt like there was a story that wanted to happen but kept getting stuck and sidetracked, and here it's finally moving. We have a villain, we're getting some more information on the rod, everything's going crazy, it's actually interesting. Episode 12 also feels like this, but at that point in the story, the series has been sucking for so long that I just couldn't get into it anymore. It was left on a cliffhanger that's never gonna get resolved, and also it has its own slurry of problems that I won't get into. It is better than a lot of the series, but I think episode 9 is probably the best. But what makes the second part of the Fall Festival better than the first one exactly? Well, I'm gonna be honest here, I think it just really boils down to the fact that the filler in the second part is a lot better than the filler in the first part. For some reason that sounds weird to say, but like, that's really what I think. Because in the first part of the episode, we have to deal with Sage and Rosemary arguing over petty issues and a bunch of other bullshit. The whole first part was basically just a setup for the second part, so we're dealing with the payoff here instead of the build-up. But I will have to talk about the first part for context, since this is a two-parter, so they're attached to each other. So to summarize, the villain for this episode, Olive, has been tasked by this guy called Smokeface to kill the main cast, because they're enclosing on the secrets of Witch Country, whatever the fuck that means. Okay, so I think there was a time skip in between this episode and the last one because the season is different. So that means Time has been holding on to the healing water for like, what, maybe months now? And still hasn't really done anything with it outside of healing like one tree. Later on, we figure out that Time is willing to do almost anything to get the fairy woods healed, including summoning a literal demon so that she can replicate the healing water formula. But apparently she's not dedicated enough to take the healing water to, I don't know, the potions teacher and ask, hey, can you like make more of this? So the main girls have just been doing a whole lot of nothing with their knowledge on the secrets of Witch Country or whatever. And for some reason the Triumvirate are like, yeah, we need them dead, like right now. So this is something that I just don't understand. Like, why do they need them dead right now, and why would they need to send Olive to do it? The girls have been doing absolutely nothing for this time. Like, they healed one tree, and then that was about it. And again, since none of them have a connection to the rot except for Time, really the only thing they would have to do is just get rid of Time. They don't even have to deal with the other girls. But for some reason, the Triumvirate are just determined to draw attention to themselves and kill the other girls. The fact that they decide to do this at all makes everything worse for them, as the girls now have a reason to get off their asses and actually look into things. But even after the girls are attacked by a cat girl, they still continue to do basically nothing for the rest of the series until Mandrake shows up and forces their hand. Okay, yes, I know, I said that these two were the best episodes, and I know we're only one scene in and everything's crumbling around us, but please, you have to trust me. That's another thing that's a problem with these episodes, is that they're handcuffed to the other episodes around them. Something that would normally be fine in a vacuum becomes an issue when you think of the broader context of the series. On paper, having the Triumvirate want to kill these girls because they know some secrets that they're not supposed to isn't a bad idea, but then you realize the secrets they actually know don't really matter all that much. The only really important detail that they do know is that healing water can cure the rot, but that doesn't really help them because according to this own series logic, for some reason they can't get any more. I know the cave is open and they probably could get more if they wanted to, but for some reason Time decides, you know what, no, this is the only vial of healing water, I can't get any more, I'm sad now. And according to her, the only person who could replicate the formula is her dad, who's gone missing. If only there were some other individuals who were extremely talented at like making potions and stuff that could probably help. If only someone like that existed. But according to this series, they have a very limited amount of healing water and for some reason they can't get any more. So why are the Triumvirate concerned about this? At best, the girls could heal a couple trees and then they'd run out of healing water, and for some reason they can't replicate the formula without Time's dad, who is probably dead. So right off the bat, the villain's plan doesn't make any sense, and they're deciding to take unnecessary actions that only hurt them in the long run. Now, if all the girls were working together to try and replicate the formula of the healing water, to try and cure the entirety of the rot, and the Triumvirate wanted the rot to continue for some reason, then yes, maybe they'd have a reason to kill them. But that's not what's happening. The girls are just kind of sitting around doing nothing. So yeah, the villain's plan just makes absolutely no sense. But after seeing the rest of this series, the fact that there were villains with any kind of plan at all doing stuff actually intrigued me. That's how low my standards have dropped. Just seeing villains do stuff, even stupid stuff, is engaging. Seeing these two opposing factions go head to head as an entire town's life is put on the line, it's really engaging compared to the rest of this stuff. And sure, yeah, if you think about it too hard, it doesn't make any sense, but like, this show has far gone past the things making sense stage. They've already fucked that up, so might as well have some fun while we're at it. So now that we've gotten past the fact that none of this makes any sense if you think about it, let's talk about Olive for a second. Probably one of the most interesting characters in the series. Not that it's a high bar or anything, and her storyline essentially boils down to, I don't want to be a villain, but I'm being forced to because of a big smoky guy. But again, even though it's really basic and other shows have done this 100 times better, it's actually engaging compared to the rest of the other characters. I also may have been slightly rooting for her to murk the main cast, but you know, let's leave my biases at the door. Olive also partakes in some of the only good action scenes in the entire series. It helps that the animation in this two-parter is a lot better than the rest of the series for some reason. I don't know who they shipped this off to for this episode in particular, but you did a better job than the rest of them. Not that the animation here is super stunning or anything, it's just better. Watching Olive scheme and attempt to isolate their girls to pick them off one by one was actually interesting. But of course, for every positive, there's a negative tied right to it. Now the action scenes with Olive are fine, unless you think about it too hard. The problem with these fights isn't what's happening, it's what's not happening. So I have to ask you, what's Olive's main weapon? That's right, it's a terrasphere. You know, those things that can shoot lasers, trap people in bubbles, conjure lightning, conjure fire, allow you to fly at high speeds. So why the fuck isn't she doing any of that? You know she knows how, she does stuff like that in episode 12, so why isn't she doing it here? Did her terrasphere run out of energy from casting that spark spell or something? Well, no, whenever a terrasphere runs out of energy, it reverts back to its previous orb state and won't turn back. But even if for the sake of argument we said her terrasphere just doesn't work right anymore, she knows how to use old magic. And we know from characters like Sage it takes seconds to draw runes to create a sleep spell and knock someone out. Unless you want to argue that Olive, a trained assassin, knows less spells than this 14-year-old first-year student at High Guardian Academy. Okay. So why is this magic-based fighter not using magic in their fights? And don't you dare say animation budget, this animation looks way better than the other fights in the series. And again, the answer is something that I've said before, and I'll say it again, it's plot. If Olive was using magic, Rosemary would get her ass beat even harder. What could Rosemary possibly have done if Olive just flew up into the air and just started spamming sleep spells down until one landed? That's right, absolutely nothing. Even if you think that Rosemary would be able to avoid any spells that Olive could fling at her, Olive just has to catch her off guard one time and the fight's over. And are you really trying to tell me that Rosemary, of all people, has better reflexes than her elven friend Time, someone who's been shown to be far more athletic? Olive was fast enough to dodge all of her attacks and drop her to her knees almost instantly. Are you starting to see why this episode being connected to everything else in the series essentially ruins it? Whenever you take the time to think critically about what's happened in the series beforehand and what happens after, none of this makes any sense. The only explanation we can come to is that Olive is just a complete moron. That's the villain we're fighting, a complete moron who doesn't know how to use their powers. This is the antagonistic force we're supposed to be afraid of. But you know what, I'm feeling nice today, so let's just let all of this slide. Let's just say she can't use magic, old or new, because spark spells, something, something, something. If you ignore all the things that have happened before in the series and the magic system entirely, these fights are semi-decent, I guess. Also, apparently Rosemary alone with no help from her teammates can take down this Olive character, so I guess these villains aren't that dangerous after all. Now, it would have been more interesting if Rosemary just got absolutely obliterated by Olive and she needed help from the rest of her friends in order to take this villain down, but I guess that would make Rosemary look less special. It's almost like the value of teamwork and friendship was a message they were trying to communicate or something. I guess not, you can just do it on your own. Speaking of teamwork, Snapdragon and Amaryllis get a side plot in this episode. Now, once again, this is filler that's distracting from the main purpose of the story, but it is filler starring Amaryllis and Snapdragon, so I can be a little more lenient. But if you think about this VR game, all the movements they're doing in the game are happening in real life, so I guess they can just jump ridiculously high. And somehow they managed to not knock over a single statue. Impressive. So eventually they get out of the game and start helping the main cast, and instead of flying around looking for Olive, Sage decides to just walk it on foot for some reason. I think they might have forgotten that Sage could fly. So Amaryllis decides to give us the breakdown on spark spells, essentially explaining as little as possible. All we know is that they come out of Witch Country and they're also pretty expensive, so that means that the Triumvirate in their grand wisdom gave this super expensive powerful magic item to an idiot who doesn't know how to use their powers. So now that we know that the Triumvirate have access to these uber powerful spark spells that can destroy entire towns if they really wanted to, do they decide to ever use them again? Nope. I guess having more than one spark spell wasn't in the budget. When Sage learns about these spark spells, she starts going off about how, oh, all this power with no required knowledge, it's so dangerous. Yes, sure, Sage, you're one to talk.
So much power with no required knowledge or work? How unsafe. I can't!
Yeah, you know, Sage, maybe you're onto something. Idiots really shouldn't be given these super powerful magic items. So long story short, they defeat and corner Olive, but she manages to escape in a blinding flurry as she rushes for her Terrasphere. Somehow she runs super far away, and the girls decide not to chase after her. No, they just sit there and bicker and argue some more. Now, looking into the fact that everyone else is stoned right now, they know she can shapeshift into a black cat, so she can't disguise as that anymore, and they should be able to track her down and chase after her because she's bleeding and probably not moving that fast. They all collectively decide to just stop searching. For some reason. Because in order for the plot to continue, the girls need to be idiots. But I guess I can't hold it to this episode too much, because that's consistent in almost every episode in the series. So Sage breaks the Terrasphere and reverses the spell, saving the day, whoop-de-doo. And all of the group collectively decide to tell absolutely no one about this, because of spies or some bullshit. Now, I'm not gonna go into how stupid that is, I've already talked about it, but it's really stupid, rest assured. So this episode is really stupid, it makes no sense, and it's also the best in the series. Contemplate that for a second. I think this is one of the best episodes in the series, and it's still riddled with so much stupidity. But what more can you expect from High Guardian Spice? So that's essentially all I had to say on this matter, but there is a problem that I'm having. You see, I don't know how to end my videos properly. Sometimes it feels like my videos just end abruptly.